I know that 100 years from now, people are going to look back and be horrified by what we do to these innocent animals. I would risk my life for this movement. I've been in situations where I have been attacked, but it's okay. I'm alive. I mean, the animals are the real victims here. But I do think it's important to be safe. And, when you look at what happened to Regan Russell, she was killed as a result of standing by the slaughterhouse at Fearman's in Canada, and she was literally run over by one of these trucks. These people are ruthless. Like, when you are in this violent industry, it's like a mafia. They will do whatever it takes to keep the truth hidden from the public, and we can't afford to lose our lives over this because we have to be a voice for the animals. If we don't do it, who else will?
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we are joined by Jamie Logan, who's going to talk to us about the different ways of speaking up for the animals, the innocent. Lots of people want to get involved in activism, and there's so many different ways. Today, Jamie's going to give us a little bit of an introduction in the different ways we can speak up for the voiceless. Jamie, I originally came across you actually watching a podcast on YouTube with Dr. Faraz Harsini, who we've also had previously on the podcast. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to get you on the podcast as well. Thanks a lot for joining. And to start off with, what made you go vegan?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Patrick, for having me. I really appreciate you checking out the podcast with Dr. Faraz. He's one of my great friends and an amazing activist, and he inspires me a lot. I'm really, really happy to be here. And there were many messages, I think, along the way that inspired me to go vegan. As a child, I always loved dogs and cats. I considered myself an animal lover, but when it came to the food that was on my plate, my morals and my actions kind of differed. And I think just growing up in a family where it was traditional to eat animals multiple times a day and culture and whatnot. My mom's from the South. My dad comes from a Russian Jewish background. So there was like a lot of meat involved in my growing up. And it wasn't until I was about, I want to say like 12 or 13 years old, did I come across a livestock slaughter truck filled with pigs on the highway, and they were headed to the slaughterhouse. And I was visiting my grandparents actually that summer, and they come from a very southern, hick from the sticks background where they see livestock trucks on the highway quite often. And I grew up in New York City, and seeing this was like a huge shock and a huge slap in the face to the truth behind where my food came from. And at the time I was sitting in the car next to my dog, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, what is the difference between these animals and my dog right here in the car? And since that moment, it made me more aware of how my food got to my plate. It reconnected the dots for me, because when you see a slab of flesh or body part, piece of meat on a plate, you don't think animal, you don't think individual, you don't think somebody with a heartbeat, you don't think that that was once a living being. It's just something that is on the plate, it's seasoned with plants, it looks tasty, it's delicious, and you eat it. And we live in a society where it's normalized. That was a huge awakening for me. And then throughout high school, I decided, okay, I'm going to go vegetarian. I'm going to do this. And at the time, I didn't know any other vegetarians. And you're at this weird stage where you want to fit in, you want to have friends and not really be the odd one out. And so I would kind of go back and forth on it. I would feel guilty if I ate meat, but then eat it to please my friends and kind of go back and forth. So it wasn't until I turned 18 and I was in college where I watched Earthlings, the documentary, which just shows standard practices in these industries, from meat, dairy, and eggs, and also cosmetic testing, fashion industry. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just can't do this anymore. And I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. And that was kind of how I went vegetarian. And then I went vegan, doing a challenge called Veganuary, which is January 1st. You pledge to go vegan for 30 days. And at the time I was like, this won't last more than 30 days. I was like, I can do it for a month, but any longer than that, like, it's not happening. I loved my, ice cream and cheese and this and that. And after those 30 days, I started getting emails from Veganuary, and they were sending me information about the dairy and egg industries. And I was like, wow, this is horrific, just as bad or worse than the meat industry. Because it's almost like prolonged suffering with the baby cows being taken away from their moms. We can steal the milk that was meant for the baby. And then the egg industry are grounding up male baby chicks alive. I was really horrified by this. And then after those 30 days, I realized how good I felt. My skin was clear. My digestion was awesome. I felt like I had a lot of energy. And I was like, I could do this. I've been vegan ever since, and it's going on 6 years. And then I became an activist. And that is a story in itself.
So I've also seen you going out on the streets doing activism, right?
Oh
You've
gosh.
just gone out there with your microphone. How did you get involved?
The activist journey was definitely one in itself for me. I started off by actually, when I went vegan, I was going to steakhouses with friends and just eating plant-based, but not really speaking up about the issue whatsoever. I didn't feel like I knew enough facts and information. And, when you go vegan, it's like everybody has a million questions for you. It's somebody wants to know where you get your protein, your iron, like, oh, well, God created animals for us. Or what about lions and tigers? And at the time, when you're a new vegan, it's like I didn't know how to answer these things. And I had a cousin out in California named Alex, who had been vegan for 13 years. Now she's been vegan for, I think, 16 or 17 years. But at the time, she was vegan for quite a while, for 13 years. And she invited me to come and stay with her and her husband at their house for like a week and a half. And in that week, she actually started like testing me on some of these funny excuses that meat eaters will ask vegans. And, I was watching Earthling Ed's videos and reading his ebook on the top excuses that you get. And it almost became like a course or like a program that I was like studying. And I was like, hit me with your next question. Like, I got this. And then I started going to Anonymous for the voiceless cubes, which for those of you guys that don't know what that is, they're basically these public displays where we hold TV screens that show standard practices in the meat, dairy, and egg industries. And at the time, I was like, I wish that somebody stood there and showed me where my food came from sooner. I want to pay this back and do the same for somebody else. And it was a way to get active, and it still is a way that I find that it's a sustainable approach to activism, because you're having these peaceful conversations through an educational approach and you're changing lives. And it's something that I find to be very effective. And also, it's like when you connect the dots of where your food comes from, you have this passion inside you, this fire where you want to speak up because you want to see change desperately in the world. And my cousin really was the catalyst for that. And I was able to find my voice, and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so empowered. Now, that one thing led to the next, where as I was going to these Anonymous for the voiceless cubes, I was meeting other people at these cubes that were inviting me to other demos and other activist events, such as slaughterhouse vigils, fur protests, different demonstrations. And I remember as I got more and more immersed in activism, my friends and family around me started to not want to be around me so much. And I started to feel really isolated. And it was really hard. I think the hardest part about going vegan was not understanding why the people that I love the most were contributing to the very issue that I was fighting every single day to end. And after my first slaughterhouse vigil, that really, really affected me and hurt me. And I was like, every single day, I'm going to do whatever I can to speak up for the animals. You're looking at these baby animals, maybe 6 months old to a year old, that are awaiting their deaths inside the slaughterhouse. They pull up on these big livestock trucks, 50 animals at a time crammed inside, sitting around in extreme weather conditions, not given food, not given water. They can hear the screams inside, they can smell the blood, and they're just looking at you like, help me, save me. And it's this feeling of helplessness because in the moment you can't do anything about it. And that was like a fire that was lit inside of me, where I was like, I may not be able to save you, but I'm going to do every single thing that I can to stop this from happening to more animals. And that kind of was a catalyst into grocery store disruptions, demonstrations, and the activism that I do now. And it was this journey of going from these vigils where I would wake up every single day, go to sleep at night, and just really like feel depressed almost. It's hard to describe like the pain that you feel. It's like you almost take on the suffering of these animals. And that was really hard. But it got to a point where I started to lose myself, and the people around me were like, "Who are you?" I was yelling at my dad for having eggs in the fridge. I was, get this breast milk out of the refrigerator. And it wasn't something that was bringing positivity to veganism. And instead, I feel like my family and friends were resenting me for it. And in any social justice interaction, I think we have to reassess, are we being effective? How can we reach the most amount of people? And I, in 2019, went to the Animal Rights March in New York City, and I met this filmmaker named Jordan Ehrlich of Cave Light Films. And he came up to me and we were talking, and I was wearing a shirt at the time that said Newark Animal Save. And that was the slaughterhouse that I would visit every week throughout college at like 5 in the morning. And he goes, "I want to film it." He goes, "Can I come one of these mornings?" And I'm like, "Sure, of course, anything to get the message out there further." So he comes and films one morning in September, and he creates this 8-minute short film called The Save Movement. And this film gets over 20 million views in just a matter of weeks. It went completely viral, completely international. And the film really, in essence, is just shining light on the industry. It's me giving water to cows and sheep and a few other activists that were there as well. And there was a heated interaction between us and the farmer on the truck. And it presented the issue in such a way that I think a lot of people resonated with, but also it was controversial because you have a lot of farmers that then would get on the page and the video and be like, "These people are giving our animals water. They can't be doing that. And these are our stakes. And this is how we feed America. And this is how we feed food." So I think it's all about shining light on this issue. And through that video alone, I was able to see the power of social media and the power of film. And so in school, I studied journalism and media, and I had internships at CNBC, SiriusXM. So I had the editing background. And I started working with this film company. And over the course of 3 years, we made 6 short films that garnered over 100 million views about stories in the animal rights movement. We told the story of Regan Russell, and the activist that was run down by the livestock truck in Canada. We told the story of the lingerie protests, activists all around the world that were going out in their lingerie and stripping down for the animals to raise awareness by any means necessary. One of our films was about Kaporos, a religious slaughter ritual that happens all over the world on the public streets. We told another story about the fashion industry and a few other ones. And it was amazing to see how we were able to take such tragic issues and make them entertaining, but also informative, and get this information across to the public. And that is kind of my first step into the film world. And I was still going to these AV cubes and doing other sorts of activism. And then Jordan said to me, he goes, "Why don't we film one of your conversations?" And that was how Jamie's Corner was born. And we filmed one of these conversations, and I'm kind of kooky and quirky as is. And I think that mixed with talking to people on the street about this really awkward and uncomfortable issue had this like humorous draw to it. And people seemed to really like it. And I was afraid to release it because I don't want to come across as insensitive. It's like you walk this fine line of being like humorous and entertaining, but also informative and serious about these issues. I know my intentions with it. And I'm like, you know what? I need to get this message across in a way that people are going to look. I can't just scream in people's faces and throw blood all over the place all the time. There's a time and place for that. And that's how I started my YouTube channel and my podcast. And now I'm just being myself and doing activism in ways that are me doing the activism. And I'm not trying to be angry or be somebody else that I'm not. And that, I think, for those listening, if you take anything away from this episode, use what you have and your own individual uniqueness to do activism. If you're an artist, do art, make posters, make t-shirts and designs that get the animal rights message across. If you're a musician, do that. If you're a public speaker, do that. If you're kind of weird and like me, film stuff on the street. If you have a film background, edit, do that. And you'll be surprised who you reach.
What's your relationship like with your parents and family, friends right now? Have you restored relations?
That's a great question. I've found that a lot of people that are close to me went vegan actually, which is like a blessing in itself. One of my best friends, Avril, my best friend Gabby, they actually, Gabby gave me a lot of pushback at first, and now she's vegan. She was dealing with a lot of health issues and gave it a try and was able to decrease all of her inflammation. Another one of my good friends, Shannon, her and I would get into fights about this, where I would tell her, dude, I'm not sitting down at the table with you while you eat that chicken sandwich. It's just not happening. I feel uncomfortable. I just came from a slaughterhouse. Like, have some respect. You know what I mean? Like, that's my boundary. And she fought me on it, and we didn't talk for a while. And now she's vegan, and she goes to a cow sanctuary every week and is a season pass holder. It takes time and patience. And when I think about the impact that I've had amongst my friends and family in just 6 years, I never found myself to be like a public speaker or inspiring person. In fact, in high school, I was like a total maniac, total party animal, couldn't care about anything other than myself. And I'm like, if I can be an activist and speak up, literally anybody can. And I found that the close people around me have made great strides. And I do think it's important to celebrate those strides and realize that it took me many years too to actually go full fledged. And I think as the options get more convenient and easier, we'll get there. And my dad, for example, he was pre-diabetic. He was on high cholesterol, high blood pressure medicine, and went plant. I would say 90% of his diet was plant-based. Here and there, he would have eggs and sometimes fish, which I do not condone or respect whatsoever. But he did make great strides in, cutting certain foods out. And he ended up going off of all of his medications, which was pretty impressive. I think if he cut out the fish and eggs, he would even have better numbers, better blood pressure numbers and cholesterol numbers. But he's getting there. And every time I visit him, it's like there's no animal products in the fridge, which is nice and which is big considering we used to fight about it all the time. My mom is pescatarian pretty much my whole life. She was never one to eat any land animals, but the dairy and the eggs and the fish are something that is tough. But I found that I can't cut myself off from 99% of the world. If I want to make change, I need to be relatable. I need to lead by example, and I need to understand that at one point I wasn't vegan either. But instead of standing there and judging everybody, I am not meeting them where they're at. I don't just let people off the hook. Like, I still push back, but I do it in a way where I say what I mean and mean what I say, but I don't say it mean.
I get you. Because many people have mad vegan phases where often at the start where they just get angry, have violent outbursts. But what you mentioned is effective activism, and many vegans, they say, "Oh, I'm not going to eat with anyone that eats animal derived products." And I'm not sure. I've never seen someone say, "I went vegan because this person refused to eat with me." Everyone that I know that's gone vegan has been through change, as you're doing.
I think I agree with that. And I think, you got to set your boundaries where you need to. For me, after going to these slaughterhouses, I developed severe PTSD from like seeing animals have their heads chopped off. And it got to a point where sitting at a table where there were meat products out I was causing more issues than being positive and effective. I think now that I've stepped back from going to slaughterhouses every week, I might be able to, but it's like I worry. It's like I don't know. I wouldn't sit down at a table where there's a dog and I don't see the difference between a dog and a pig. It's like I almost feel like by sitting down, I'm normalizing it. I go back and forth. I think if you can be positive and show people, wow, this is all the great food I can eat, that's awesome. But also what I do is when I go out with people, I'm like, I'll pick the place, just meet me here. And then I show them all this amazing, great plant-based food. And it's like, I don't have to sit there and be uncomfortable, and they enjoy the food. It's like, that's also another way to advocate.
Do you avoid eating with people that eat animal derived products like currently right now?
I can't recall the last time I actually sat down at a table where there were animal products. The one person that I have done it before and would do it for is my grandfather. He's 83 years old, doesn't get it at all. I see him maybe once a year. And it's like part of like what we do when I visit him is go out to eat. Like, there's really nothing else to do with him. And there's no vegan restaurants in that area. And he just like, it's one of those that like, it's the one thing that we just like cannot see eye to eye on. There's like little exceptions. And I think with activism in general, we need to realize who we're talking to and adjust our approach. So I find that with some friends, I can be a little bit more like, come on, bro, like get off the cow tit. You know, I could be a little bit more raunchy and raw. And with other friends, I need to walk them through and be like, you know, listen, like you should check out this study. It goes to show how inflammatory dairy is and what the havoc that it wreaks on your body, and just finding what that approach is for different people.
Back to the activism for people listening in America, if someone wants to go out on the street and record stuff, do they need a permit or something like this? In Switzerland, I think you need permits.
That's a good question. In New York City, you can go out on the street and pretty much film wherever you want. I do carry around photo releases so that if somebody tries to come after me later on, I have people sign the photo release saying that I can use their image. But I'm in public places, I'm in public parks, and I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. I'm having these conversations and I want it to spread, right? By filming it and posting it on social media, more people are able to see it.
Back to your debates that you have you came across the term gaslighting?
I know what gaslighting is, but are you saying, have I gaslit somebody or has somebody gaslit me?
Have you come across people that have tried to seed the doubt in your position? Because there's especially lots of very intellectuals, they come up with very silly excuses, such as Neil deGrasse Tyson. He'll say stuff such as trees, they bleed when they're cut. Or Sam Harris, he talks about happy cows. Ultimately, if you think about it, it's just excuses, but they're trying to seed the doubt. Have you ever had these sort of arguments put towards you when you've been doing activism?
All the time. And that's why I think as activists, it's important that we have a clear message with facts to back ourselves up, you know, to be out on the street and to really know what we're talking about. And I like to ask people questions back, and I like to teach through questioning. When I'm out doing the anonymous for the voiceless cubes, as opposed to telling people how you should feel about this and you should care about the cows, you should care about the environment, I ask people, how do you feel about this? Have you seen this type of footage before? What do you think we could do to stop it? And like hearing where they're coming from, and through that, you start to get to know the person that you're talking to, and then you can adjust your approach. If I'm talking to somebody that's more health focused, I'll focus on the health. You know, the animals at the end of the day is what veganism is all about. And I always bring it back to the animals. But I think it's important that if we can draw somebody in to veganism, let's draw them in how we can. If they're more interested in the health at first, that's fine. Let's bring them in through the health and show them that a plant-based diet is the healthiest diet out there. If they're more interested in the environment, well, one of the things that you can do, the best thing that you can do is go vegan for the environment and for the planet. I run into things all the time. I was talking to this guy a few weeks ago and he's like, what about people that need food to survive and they're in food deserts? And I said to him, I go, sir, I am standing in the West Village of New York City talking to you. I'm not in food deserts advocating for veganism. I think we do need to make plant-based foods more affordable and accessible. But right now, where we're at today, you and I can both afford to make better, more compassionate choices. And it's one of those things where people will bring up other people's excuses and other people's situations to try to justify their own. And I always bring it back to the animals and point and bring them back to, this is where we're at today. This is the topic we're discussing, and you are not in that situation, sir. So please stop using other people's excuses as a way to justify continue harming animals.
Or what about these tribes in the North Pole? You know, how can they be vegan? But just focus on yourself, right?
It's like, where do you shop for your groceries? I know, Whole Foods. Yes, I know. You are wearing a Rolex watch and, you know, have a diamond wedding ring on. It's like, come on, stop already. And I'm going to call you out on it. Like,
it's mental gymnastics. And if we're just looking within the vegan community, some people, they say, I feel like I don't want to go vegan just because of some perceived strictness from the vegan community. potentially they feel like they're going to get judged if they do something which someone might not see as vegan. What do you do? Do you highlight hypocrisy in every single case? Do you always try and make them aware when they are not acting according to vegan ethics? What is your approach to not push people away?
I think that's a good question. I think if I don't think veganism is about being perfect per se. We live in a non-vegan world where you're going to get in a car and there's going to be leather seats. You know, if you have a cookie by accident, I don't think that makes you any less vegan. It's not about being perfect. Veganism is about reducing suffering to the farthest extent as possible. And I check every ingredient a million times. I'm pretty adamant about being like, especially with the foods, like I read through all the labels and ingredients, they make it pretty easy nowadays. But I don't think people should beat themselves up on it and instead learn from the mistakes that you make. Because when I first went vegan, there were certain chewing gums, certain wines and beers that were filtered through fish bladders and intestines that I didn't know about. It's like, how am I supposed to know these things? Nobody tells you this or teaches you this in school. I think it's just important to learn from it and then do better next time. And we really don't want to support these industries with our consumer dollars, right? That's really important. I at this point, it's like, I want to be effective. And I think that people get turned off when you beat them up over it. But instead you can offer your help or I could go shopping with somebody and say, hey, you know what? Let me take you to the grocery store and let me show you some great options. It'll be cheaper and I'll get you some really tasty food and show you some recipes that I make every single day. But veganism, I want to be clear, is not just about the food. It goes to your clothing, it goes to your makeup products, to your soaps, to the entertainment that you attend. I don't go to SeaWorld and watch dolphins do flips. I don't ride horses. It's a learning process. And especially growing up in a non-vegan world, you have to unlearn all of these biases that you were taught and these oppressive thoughts that you were taught towards animals.
And you mentioned riding horses. That's a good one because there's many people, they like horses, they love animals, but they still think it's okay to ride on them. This is something I've not heard too much people discuss. Why is it wrong to ride on horses?
I think that it's one of those things that with veganism, there's a spectrum, right? So, like, obviously, slitting a cow's throat and riding on a horse are two different things. But I come from the approach of total animal liberation, where I don't think we should be using animals to as far as is practically possible or exploiting them in any way for human entertainment, clothing, or food. And so by riding a horse, you're putting a metal bit in their mouth, you're putting a saddle on them. It can be terrible for their backs. Some people whip them. I mean, it's not something that I would want to happen to me. And I think we need to ask ourselves, would we want this done to us before we say it's okay to do it to somebody else? And yes, animals are somebody's. They have thoughts, they feel pain, they dream, they suffer. They are sentient beings that deserve to live on this earth just like we do. And I think that's part of the problem is we don't see animals as somebodies. We see them as commodities. And that's what allows us to oppress them in the ways that we do. Am I spending my days, going around to people that are horseback riding and yelling at them? No, I'm not doing that. I mean, I would speak up in a situation and in a kind way and just be like, listen, there's other ways that you can have fun and enjoy. You can bond with a horse in other ways, but this is not necessarily the best thing. But I'm trying to focus my efforts on systematic change, really specifically in the fur and the food industry, and trying to get winnable battles and winnable victories. Here in New York, we have a great activist crew where we hit different designer stores and we try to get them to drop fur, and we've had a lot of success. I mean, Saks Fifth Ave dropped fur, Canada Goose even dropped fur, a lot of places. It's actually almost getting to the point where we're like, okay, where do we go next? We want to see winnable battles and we want to see success. And we have to be strategic in our approach.
And when you're doing activism, how do you balance compassion for humans while speaking up for the animals? Someone asked me this question to ask you actually, because they feel like, how do you speak up enough for the animals without sort of getting angry or pushing people or not actually having respect for people?
Absolutely. This is something I had to learn because I would get flustered and angry and hurt and upset at what people were doing to animals. I'm like, how do you not see what you're doing? You're torturing them. Like, what is wrong with you? And I try to remember that they are deeply conditioned just like I was at one point. I mean, I had held a fishing rod at one point in my life. I went to rodeos. I went to a rodeo once or twice, but I was too one of those people that was oppressing animals. And I really try my hardest to just keep in mind if I want to get through to them, the way that I speak to them is going to be important. And I have developed more compassion in my heart for people because I also recognize how the animal agriculture industries exploit people of low income, brackets. They also exploit the workers that are working in these industries. I mean, nobody grows up and wants to be a slaughterhouse worker. Nobody wants to kill all day long. They end up in these situations working long hours, working in dangerous conditions, have substance abuse issues, different psychological issues just from working in these places. So yes, I have compassion for these people. I mean, there have been times where I've been to slaughterhouses and I've yelled at some of them and been like, "You're a monster. What is wrong with you?" I don't doubt that there are some psychotic people working in these places. I mean, I have had slaughterhouse workers come up to me and show me blood like in their teeth and, try to egg me on and that kind of thing. But by holding this hate in my heart and anger in my heart, it's not making the world vegan any faster. In fact, it's just making me less effective and less able to do this in the long run. I had to really take a step back and be like, how do I want to show up in 50, 60 years from now and be an activist forever and speak up for the animals forever? And that's how I think I've found a sustainable approach, which is through my YouTube show, which is through social media, which is through education, leading by example, legislation. I mean, I want to at some point in my life get involved in politics. And these are just, future goals. But I think having compassion, at the end of the day, veganism is about having compassion for all living beings. It's about defending the victims in any situation. At least that's how I see it, because it's like if we can show animals love and compassion and we can see animals as beings that deserve to be here and see them as somebodies, we can sure treat each other with that same respect and same kindness.
You have a very good example about how your compassion managed to change someone in your personal life. Do you know what I'm talking about?
My grandfather? Oh, my
No,
boyfriend. My
yeah,
boyfriend. Two very
yeah.
different people. Yes. And also, it's not to say, too, that what we were just talking about before, that there are some really wacky people out there that are not compassionate people. I mean, human beings will take, take, take. We're very selfish. We're greedy. And I just try not to waste my time on people that are not open to the message. And I think if we can just get the people that are open minded, that are kind of like the low hanging fruits, then that's something that I try to focus on. Because if we could just get 3% of the population to go vegan, we will see a very different world and we'll reduce a lot of suffering for animals. But yes, my boyfriend. I have been with my boyfriend for about 3 years now. We've known each other for 10 plus years. We went to middle school together and we started dating in 2020 during the pandemic, and he was not vegan. And I, at the time, was in my like hardcore going into grocery stores, pouring blood everywhere, breaking into slaughterhouses, rescuing animals, which I still do, but kind of phase. And it was like, how could I date somebody and be with somebody as my life partner that doesn't see the world the same way I do or get it the same way I do? And from the very beginning, I set my boundaries. And I highly recommend that if you are a vegan dating a non-vegan, that you do this. I think it's essential and important. It would not have worked out had I not set these boundaries. And these boundaries were, number one, you will not eat these products in front of me. That to me was a boundary. I needed him not to do that because it would have caused me to feel resentment. I would have gotten upset and angry. And as I explained earlier in the podcast, that I was traumatized from seeing animals be killed. And I was like, I don't want to see these products. And it would have like made me unattracted to him, honestly. That was not my first boundary. My second boundary is that he's open about it and allows me to, talk freely about it and allows me to do the activism work that I need to do. Because I find that sometimes vegans will get into relationships with non-vegans and then feel that they need to silence themselves or not be as much of an activist anymore. And I was like, no, 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 that is not happening. Like, you have to respect that, like, this is what I do. And if this doesn't work for you, then ta-ta, see you later. That was my second boundary. And my third one, I didn't say this explicitly to him, but he would have to go vegan at some point. I cannot be with somebody in the long term that is not vegan, like that oppresses animals every single day. It's like, this is my purpose. This is my passion. This is why I feel that I was born and alive. And in the long run, if he can't make the connection like I did, I just don't think that we were meant to be together. And throughout our relationship, the first year, I didn't force this down his throat. I didn't force these issues on him, but I led by example, and I took him to animal sanctuaries. And at about the 6 to 8 month mark, I would say I had him watch Earthlings, I think I had him watch Dominion. And this man was sobbing. He was like so disgusted, terrified. And he took an approach similar to like how I did. He went pescatarian, then vegetarian, then vegan. And it's been 2 years now, and he's vegan and he's not an activist. Well, he's an activist in his own way. He'll like talk about it with his friends, but he's not contributing to the issue. And thank God, because it's like the clock was ticking, buddy.
And does he have any skills which you think he could turn into activism outside of the debating?
He's a filmmaker, and so he tries to weave in certain messages in his films, which the last film that I actually shot for him that he wrote and directed, we used Beyond Burgers and Beyond Chicken Nuggets. So he's like, he's careful with these things. And I really hope that at some point he becomes more of an activist, but it's okay, because it's nice to, we kind of live our separate lives, but then also come together at time. It's like I have my activism friends and I do my protests and whatnot. And it's like I can come home and it's like peace and quiet. Like I don't need to be on all the time. Otherwise I would burn out.
But you're truly a hero, all the stuff that you're doing. Have you ever felt like you're putting yourself in danger from what you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're going into some of these places in the middle of the night and you don't really know what could happen. Like these farmers have guns and cameras, but I know that we're on the right side of history. And it's like, what would I be doing in other times of social justice movements, during the civil rights movement, during the Holocaust? Like I would be doing what I'm doing right now. And I know that 100 years from now, people are going to look back and be horrified by what we do to these innocent animals. You know what? Like I would risk my life for this movement. Like if somebody told me that I could stop what's happening to animals and make the world a vegan place, but I had to die today, I would. Absolutely. I've been in situations where I have been attacked. I mean, during the Kaporos ritual where they were like slaughtering chickens on the public streets, I was attacked by a group of people because I had a chicken crate with me and I had like a neck injury. I have some stitches here, but it's okay. I'm alive. I mean, the animals are the real victims here, but I do think it's important to be safe. And, when you look at what happened to Regan Russell, it's like we're coming up on her 3-year tragic anniversary where she was killed as a result of standing by the slaughterhouse at Fearman's in Canada, and she was literally run over by one of these trucks. These people are ruthless. Like when you are in this violent industry, it's like a mafia. They will do whatever it takes to keep the truth hidden from the public, and we can't afford to lose our lives over this because we have to be a voice for the animals. If we don't do it, who else will? So be safe, be careful.
Per week, we kill billions of animals. And I've never met someone that works in the slaughterhouse. I'm not sure where they hang out and stuff.
There's a lot of people that work in these industries, quite seemingly normal, quote unquote, people. I mean, I've talked to some of these workers and tried to help them and get better jobs and better situations, but they're like, the pay is better than if I were doing, another job. And this one guy, he's like, I'm raising a daughter by myself. Like, I am only doing this temporarily until I can leave. And I don't think it's something that people are normally proud of, right? I don't know if there's a lot of people don't talk about it, but it's not, it's sad that they have to work in these horrible, horrible places.
In the back of your mind, you know what they're doing, right?
Well, everybody wants to say, well, I don't kill the animal. Like, what did I do? I'm off the hook. I just go to the grocery store and pick up the meat. And it's like, why do you think the animal was killed in the first place? You just have somebody doing the dirty work for you.
You see people walking with a pet and they just walk off and they don't even want to stop and talk. They'll just rather pay for someone to do it behind their backs. It's just crazy, these double standards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we have to remember, though, that it's like there's going to be people that are not ready to accept the message. Unfortunately, no matter what we say, no matter what we do, they are just not there yet, or not ready to hear it. And that was kind of a hard pill to swallow for me, because I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of an urgent matter. These animals are dying every single day. You kind of have to change now, but what am I going to do? Stand there and force feed people? I can't. I can only provide the information and hope that they change, for the better, whether it's for their own health, for the environment, or for the animals.
Even vegans, they've contributed to, in some way or another, before they went vegan, to animal abuse. After that, you have a moral urgency to speak up once you realize, right?
Right, exactly. And that's why I think, we need to get more activists. Like, if you're a vegan and you feel strongly that animal agriculture needs to end and needs to end soon, then you got to get active and speak up in whatever way that may be. And for me, it's been, as I told you, it's been many different approaches that I've taken. And I think that it's just important to try it out, like simply going outside in the park and holding a sign with some sort of animal rights message on it, whether it's, I don't know, like, ask me why I'm vegan. And then people will come up to you and ask you, and it's ways to start this conversation. Or, you could even just hold signs that are something like with a fact on it, like 99% of chickens in the US are factory farmed. That means that they were raised in tight, confined conditions. They never saw the light of day. They were killed at 42 days old, and these are things that you can like talk about. And I do think that as humans, we are innately compassionate. I think we do love animals. When you look at children and how they interact with animals, we don't want to hurt them. We just are removed from the process. And I think most people will reconnect with their compassion. And I did a speech the other day where I was talking about, I'm like, we are not at war with human nature. We are at war with habit. And that's a winnable battle because we can change our habits.
Have you ever just gone up speaking with people who are eating a burger, for example, or?
I think there's a time and a place for it. I mean, I go to the grocery store and I talk to people that are literally picking up the meat right then and there. And you can come across two different kinds of people. You can come across somebody that is getting defensive because it's like they're actually buying it right now, similar to how if somebody's eating a burger, they might get a little defensive because they're actually eating it in that moment and you're confronting them about it. Or you might have somebody that's like, oh my God, you're right, and put it down. And that's happened to me too. I think we need to stand our ground and speak up even when our voice shakes. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that inside the supermarket. Like, I have slaughter videos like just on my phone ready to go and ready to play. And I don't do this all the time, but not every time I go into the supermarket, because sometimes I just need to get in and get out and get to work, or wherever I'm going. But, I try to where I can. I think that you never know whose life you're going to change from this. And you may talk to somebody that's like a major lawyer or somebody that becomes a huge activist for the animals and changes because of something that you said to them. So I think it's always worth a try, but I think it's really important to leave people with some kind of positive message about veganism at the end of the day. Even if you are in a little bit of an argument or tussle with somebody, being respectful and kind and, like, sir, have a great day. I really appreciate you stopping to talk with me. And I hope that you look into these industries further or something like that, where you don't leave them being like, oh, that freaking vegan, because sometimes people won't remember what you said to them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And it's little planted seeds along the way that maybe just will sprout at some point and they will go vegan. I don't think it happens overnight for most people.
Have you ever set the seeds in someone's mind and then maybe they've contacted you sometime after and they've been like, oh, you've converted me? Has that happened to you?
Yes, many times actually. I mean, I could just to name one, I was at a cube for Anonymous for the Voiceless a few months ago, and somebody that I didn't recognize, don't even think I've ever seen before, came up to me and was like, "Are you Jamie?" And I was like, "What's up?" Like, "Hi." And they're like, "I just want to let you know that we spoke about veganism. I think it was like 8 to 10 months ago, and I've been vegan ever since. And I just want to thank you for showing me the way and providing this information." And now this person is an activist and sometimes comes out to the cubes. And that is like, I have chills even speaking about it because I'm like, who knew that I could have that kind of impact on somebody's life? And I get messages all the time being like, I've stopped eating meat, dairy, and eggs just from seeing your videos. And that is, I think, in any form of activism, we have to have some sort of optimism and believe that we can win this. And I'm confident that the world is changing and that we are going to reach people. We just have to keep speaking up about it.
Earlier on, you mentioned 100 years. Do you reckon it will
Yeah.
take 100 years?
I mean, it's hard to say, right? I mean, I think people are never going to stop eating meat, but I think the types of meat that they will stop eating are going to be slaughtered animals. So, what I mean by that is with these new technologies of cultivated meat, other people know it as lab grown meat or meat that comes from animal cells but doesn't actually kill the animal. This is new technology that if people can eat meat without all the negative consequences of it, confining, mutilating, killing animals, then go for it. Let's eat that. It's now just a matter of figuring out how to scale it and make it price matched so that people can afford it. I think that through new technologies, it's like eventually our world, our environment is not going to be able to sustain animal agriculture the way we know it. And I think in 100 years we're going to see a lot of new technologies and advancements that will project us further into a vegan world. I mean, it's hard to say, but I do feel like just in the past 6 years that I've been in this movement, I've seen so many options popping up at different fast food places, and veganism has become more mainstream and people know what the term means. I mean, I didn't know what it meant beforehand. I knew what vegetarian was, but change is happening faster than we think. But I think through new plant-based products and advancements, we'll see more of a vegan world and at least get people to recognize that animals deserve to live and not have their lives taken from them for a sandwich.
There's a plant-based 3D printed steak, and they do it in London, and people are saying that apparently it's just as good, and it's not even made from stem
Juicy
cells. So it
marbles?
could be. I cannot remember. I don't think it's juicy marbles, but I'll send it to you, or I'll link
Yeah,
it in after.
I'm all for the plant-based meats and this and that. As far as the cultivated meat goes, it's actual meat. It's from cells of animals. It doesn't have to harm the animal. And the big question is, would you eat it as a vegan? And personally, I don't. I would probably try it just to be able to tell people, like, I've tried it and it does taste exactly like meat. It's the same thing, basically, just to try it. But my body feels good on a whole foods plant-based diet that I don't need meat. I don't necessarily even want it. I don't crave it. I don't want cheese. Like I feel energetic. My digestion's good. It's like I don't think I would eat it or want it. But it's not mainly geared towards vegans. It's geared towards people that want to eat meat but also don't want to harm animals.
Somewhere where I believe is a lot of opportunity is from the education, the school system.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone that is building some sort of syllabus inside the school curriculum where they teach kids about animal ethics? Do you know if anything like this exists or anyone is developing something?
There's a few programs that are doing good work. The first one that comes to mind is Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, which is Dr. Faraz Harsini's program. And he provides students on campus with resources to then provide other students on campus. They'll do different outreach. where they'll hand out pamphlets, flyers, free food, do talks, that kind of thing. I think that's really important. And then there's Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, which is a group of people that go into schools and will actually talk about standard practices in factory farming and animal agriculture. But it's kind of hard getting in some of these schools. I mean, I've done a few talks at colleges, and it's like, to even get in there, it's difficult. Like, people don't always, they're hesitant to discuss this issue. And I got into Rutgers through the Vegan Veg Society. Like, they hooked up that meeting and that talk. But, we just got to keep reaching out and trying, because it is important that people learn about this. It's like, why should we not know where our food comes from? Like, if there was nothing to hide, then if everything was going as they say it is and everything was normal about these industries, then why are they keeping it a secret from us? Why aren't we seeing advertisements of slaughterhouses down the grocery store aisles? It's because they knew that if more people saw what happened inside of these facilities, they would not have business.
I was thinking even earlier on, maybe 8, 9 years old, and if they had something for, I don't know if it's called primary school in America, but primary school, and that's what we call it here in Europe, just when kids are still in their early years. If they were shown what happens, it might traumatize them, but I think it would definitely create a big change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you can't watch where your food's coming from, then you definitely should not be eating these projects. I think through education, through civil disobedience and disruptions and rescues and media, we will make great strides in our lifetime and hopefully guarantee our future generations a planet to live on. I mean, it's sad because the people that don't even exist yet are going to be the ones to deal with the consequences of our actions.
It was great having you here. To finish off, could you give us your top 3 tips for debating?
Top 3 tips. Well, first off, do your research, know who you're talking to and know your audience, right? If I'm debating a health guy, make sure that I study up on the facts with that. and also, I think number 2 would be to bring it back to the ethics. Always bring it back to the animals, because that is something that you cannot argue. You cannot argue that what happens to these sentient beings is wrong, and that taking their life for 10 minutes of pleasure that you get from biting into that burger is okay. You can't argue that. I always try to bring things back to the ethics. And then the third is to take a deep breath and keep your calm. I think that the level and tone of your voice is important, and that when you get flustered and you get worked up, sometimes your thoughts won't come out as effectively and clear. So if you need to just pause, take a second, think about it, and then respond, I recommend doing that because it can be really helpful.
Okay, those are 3 great tips. I think it's important to breathe sometimes when you're debating, because it can get quite stressful.
You can get really stressed, like tightened chest, your throat feels like it's closing, and breath work and breathing through these things is a real game changer. It's really helpful.
And then always bringing it back to the animals as well.
And recognize that we're right. You can't lose this if you try. We are literally, it's amazing. I love battling people and I love having debates because I love always being right. So you can't argue it. The facts and the science are on our side. Keep that in mind too.
Thanks for all of this excellent advice you've given in this podcast. There's lots to take away. Yay. I'll link all yours so people can follow you and watch your amazing content.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm at It's Jamie's Corner on YouTube. It's Jamie's Corner on Instagram. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Reach out. I try to go through my DMs and answer everyone. I really appreciate everyone who listened. And thank you so much, Patrick, for having me on.
Thanks a lot for tuning in. You can support Foolproof Mastery in a number of ways. First of all, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a review on Apple Podcasts with an honest opinion of what you think. Leave plenty of comments on YouTube and share with your friends, family and colleagues if you feel that you have learned something new, in order to keep on getting the knowledge out to as many people as possible. Finally, keep on living every day to the maximum, and see you next time for another episode. Ciao.